Broadcasting from the Golden Spread of Texas, this is The Fred Hughes Show. With each episode, we introduce to you an inspiring person or message to help you grow and unlock your potential in life. I'm Fred Hughes, professional photographer, pastor, teacher, author, and your show host. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to this episode brought to you by the Faithful Partners of Decision Ministry.
Hello, my name is Scott Beard, and I'm glad to be able to be part of this podcast today. I pastor Fountain Gate Fellowship in Abilene, Texas. I have lived there for 32 years. My wife and I have raised 5 children there, and now they have given us 10 grandchildren. We have lived a very great life in Abilene and have loved being there. Back in November, it was November 7th, 2021, was kind of watching closely some things going on in Lubbock. Lubbock, I had heard they were about to pass a Sancuary City for the Unborn ordinance in Lubbock. And so we were watching that closely. I was at a church meeting the night that my social media feed kind of began to blow up, in fact, the city of Lubbock had passed the Sanctuary City for the Unborn ordinance. I immediately knew, I got the shoulder tap from the Lord at that point that this was something that he wanted for Abilene, Texas. And so in my mind, a bit naive, I'll have to admit now on the other side of it, well, I thought this will just be a shoe-in because Abilene is very conservative. Taylor County, very conservative in 2016, voted I believe it was 92 or 3% for Donald Trump. And so, just saying we're very red, very conservative. This will be great. So I immediately text our mayor, and I've got a good relationship with our mayor. And he said, yeah, sure, come in on Monday. And we sat down together, and then immediately I knew based on some of the things he was telling me that this was going to be an uphill battle. His suggestion was to go through a resolution process, and resolution's only as good as the paper it's written on. And I knew that wasn't going to be the case, but that we needed this ordinance. That my feeling strongly was that God was mandating that we bring the blessing, his blessing on our city by passing an ordinance that outlaws abortion in Abilene, Texas. So that began a 1.5-year process. We are now on the other side of that, but I have been very blessed to been able to go through the process we did, as hard as it was, as much resistance as we faced. I will share this one thing, and then I want to talk a minute about Amarillo. But Abilene is the home of Sarah Weddington. And Sarah Weddington was the lawyer that argued Roe v. Wade in 1973, the youngest attorney ever to appear in the Supreme Court to get a case, a case passed. In this case, it was to legalize abortion. And it turns out that Sarah Weddington was a resident of Abilene, Texas. Her father pastored a church in Abilene. And so we know, in fact, she went to McMurray University. So we know that, in fact, there were those connections. She's recently passed away, and McMurray just has even now put a monument forward to honor her. And when you think about that, this is somebody that began the process of 60 million plus babies being aborted in our nation since 1973. And so that's right there in our city. So we began to realize early on as pastors and leaders, as we led this initiative, that was going to be some of the struggles, some of the things we were going to be up against. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. And we knew that that's what this was, and we had to fight it accordingly. And there were things in the natural that we had to do, and we did those things, and we were faithful to do those things. We had to get 10% of registered voters' signatures, which we had 60,000 registered voters in Abilene. That meant we needed 6,500 plus or so signatures that were certified signatures. We ended up getting 10,000 signatures to get the 6,500, but we got them. And then it went before our city council. Long story short, city council then approved to put it forward onto our ballot. And then it would have been May of 2022, then that ordinance, 2023, that ordinance was passed, 53% to 47%. You'd think that in a conservative place like Abilene, it would have been a landslide, but we were grateful for what we got. And we are now a sanctuary city for the unborn in Abilene. And then even since, our city council's made efforts to try to change some of the language of that, and we have kind of gone back at them, and uh, we were able to kind of get them to back down. Mark Lee Dixon obviously is a very influential person in making these things happen, and seeing these ordinances passed in cities. Mark being the author of them, along with Jonathan Mitchell. And Mark, alongside us, then we countered our city councils. They tried to make changes after the ordinance was voted in a democratic process in Abilene. There were efforts to try to change the ordinance, but they did make a few changes. It didn't affect the integrity of the ordinance, but it's still going on. We've got a battle now with someone who is wanting to start an initiative to completely remove the ordinance. So it stirred something in our city that. Clearly there was a stronghold there for just this whole demonic thing of aborting and murdering the unborn. So we're here. Here we are now. And so I'm excited to be in Amarillo. And because we now, as a city, we're about 120,000 in Abilene. We want to be part of helping, other cities in any way that we can to just promote making sure that this gets passed, helping with maybe a little bit of the knowledge of what we went through, that can maybe help you guys here in Amarillo. Had a great meeting with a group of leaders today, just talking about that whole process. We had a bunch of for the campaign side of our ordinance being passed. We had a bunch of material signs, 4x4 signs, yard signs, and all kinds of material like that. And so we brought a trailer full so that you guys could even repurpose that, because we're all in. We want to help Amarillo in this process. And so in the meeting this morning, I discovered some things, learned some things. And as a pastor, as this is listened to by other pastors, I just want to encourage you. I have to share a story that World War II, many have heard this story, but a little church next to some railroad tracks, the train would go by every Sunday morning. One Sunday morning, the train stopped, broke down by that church, and there were in those cattle cars Jews that were being taken to concentration camps. This is during World War II, and those in the church could hear them screaming. And what the pastor did in response to that was to sing louder and to try to cover up the screams of those Jews being taken to their death. And I think that's what we're seeing in large part by a lot of churches that consider the abortion issue to be a political issue. But in fact, it's a moral issue. And because it's a political issue, they don't want to ruffle feathers. We keep politics out of the pulpit. And this is the kind of comments. One pastor told me, there's a good friend of mine. I asked him, would you be involved with our ordinance? And he said, that's just a hill that I don't want to die on. And I thought, but you'll let babies die on that hill. I mean, I just don't understand the mindset. And that was probably one of the most disappointing things, is the pushback that we got from pastors. So it's literally, pastors are turning their music up. Churches are turning their music up. They're doing things to cover up the fact that babies, 60 million something babies have been murdered in our country. And we've sat by since 1973 and let it happen. Praise God. Roe v. Wade was overturned. I know the authority has gone back to the states. Certainly abortion is legal in states that support it. But I praise God for Texas and praise God for Amarillo. So as pastors, my encouragement to you is, don't back off. Don't turn your music up. Don't try to drown out what's happening. That is the greatest atrocity ever known to mankind, to see these many millions of babies aborted since 73. What can you do in Amarillo as a pastor? Get behind this. Get the signatures. Get the vote out. When you get to the campaign process, get your people out. Just get on the ground, knock doors. What better cause? Our position, when I met with all our city leaders and mayors and city councilmen, it was always to say this: look, I want to bring the blessing of God on Abilene, Texas. I had friends of mine in Lubbock after they had passed the ordinance, and I was in communication with them. They had record rainfall. They had record crops. They saw a record yield in their cotton crops. And that's not coincidence. That all came because they took a stand for life. And that was my position in Abilene. And we took that stand for life. And I know God has blessed that and will continue to bless that. I want that for Amarillo. take that stand for life. For us, in many ways, it was an education process. We had to train and educate people, get out on social media about what the issue was, why this was important to pass the ordinance in Abilene. And our ordinance was a little different than Lubbock's ordinance. In fact, it was about twice as long because some things changed after Senate Bill 8, of course, was passed in Texas, the Heartbeat Act, and then as it went to the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade was overturned. So our ordinance had to take on some new language, and the same with Amarillo. And now, as I understand it, Amarillo's ordinance has even some other additions to that to further protect, the unborn, the whole thing with abortion trafficking that's come up. Even that, in Abilene, if you're a resident in Abilene and someone comes and aids and abets and helps you to go to New Mexico to get an abortion, that person then can be prosecuted for what they've done to aid and abet in an abortion. And that, that it's not just something within the city limits, that if it's a citizen of Abilene, and the abortion's done in Albuquerque, then it's still against the law, and that abortionist can be prosecuted. Now, Amarillo's things go next level, as I understand it, that even if someone is traveling through Amarillo on the way to an abortion, this ordinance would if they were caught in any way, this ordinance would make sure that there would be repercussion and consequences for doing that. It's just making sure at every angle that there's just not the opportunity for an abortion to happen in Amarillo, or that it be connected in any way to Amarillo. Some things I learned as well, just even regarding those babies that have been aborted, the remains of those babies. Didn't know this, but I don't know how much of the larger public of Amarillo knows this, but that there is, there is a site where these babies are brought, and is part of a kind of a biological dumping ground of some kind. I don't know all the details on it. I'm just kind of hearing about that. Well, that's something that needs to stop, and that's something that is, as citizens and pastors, that the atrocity of that kind of blood on your land is not something you want. That's not something that I think obviously that Amarillo wants. And so I would just encourage you. These are details that I'm not hugely familiar with. I'm hearing more about it, but just to ask questions, get with pastors, get with those that are helping this initiative in Amarillo. And as a pastor, I would encourage you to just say yes to doing all you can do to get behind this movement, to make sure, man, that we get the signatures. You guys are just right there. It sounds like you just got to get over the finish line with the number of signatures you got to get. And then once that happens in the campaign phase, just go all in. What better thing than to protect the unborn, to stand for those that can't stand for themselves, and to make sure that Abilene and Amarillo, we did in Abilene, but to make sure that Amarillo stays in the blessing of God and that His blessing remain on this city. What better way to bring it than to protect the unborn? So that's kind of my statement. Just want to encourage you guys as pastors, and feel free to reach out to me. I think there'll be some information given here that will allow you to do that if there's any questions that you might have. So thanks for the opportunity. God bless.
If you enjoyed the show today, be sure and get the download and the show notes that we have available for you. If you agree that this is a place to be, invite your friends. Use those little buttons to connect us to your Facebook friends and others. And if you have not subscribed, do it today. Check out our free downloads. This is the Fred Hughes Show, signing off.